First off, I wanted to welcome everybody to tonight's forum for the State Senate District 33. On behalf of the Chamber, I'd like to once again say thank you for coming out. Thank you to the candidates tonight for agreeing to be here. And thank you to Cal State Long Beach for hosting. At this moment, would like to introduce a very special guest, especially to the campus here, who has agreed to say a few remarks before we get started. So if you all can give her a very warm welcome, I have the honor of presenting President Jane Close Connolly of Cal State Long Beach.
And thank you, Alex, for introducing me. I am Jane Connolly, President of Cal State Long Beach. It's a great job. I get to park wherever I want. And I did not have to pay. I saw all of you kind of paying there, so sorry about that. Welcome, candidates who are here for the Senate District 33 spot. So on behalf of the whole university and the event sponsors, let me thank the candidates for their participation. And I hope you will all enjoy your time here and take a moment to enjoy our beautiful campus if you can. It's really important to me that we're having this kind of event, and we look to sponsor these kind of events because civic education is a vital part of our democracy and a crucial part of what we do here at Long Beach State. We strive to provide an educational experience that makes our students ready for the real world. And there's nothing more important than having a voice in the political process. And so having you here is another manifestation of that. We really are focused on advancing the public good, and that means we strive to engage community members of all ages and backgrounds to activities and lifelong learning experiences, and I know that candidates today will provide you with that. So as I see it, the purpose of a university is not just to teach and create knowledge, but it also is to be a community resource. And Long Beach State has a long history of serving our city and our region, and I think tonight's candidates forum is another example of this vibrant tradition that we have. There's a group called the Institute for Democracy in Higher Education, and they have published a piece, and I'll quote them just briefly. It says, "An election offers the proverbial teachable moment." Think about what happens by one election, a series of elections, how it changes our experience. So the teachable moment, because it reinforces and introduces important principles and practices of shared responsibility, inclusion and equity, and respect for dissenting viewpoints. So I'm so glad we can play a role in imparting and reinforcing these very important principles. Now, I've been reminded to say, now before we begin, just like to remind you that tonight's event is not necessarily a debate, but rather an opportunity for us to get to know the candidates and hear directly from them about their positions on a variety of issues affecting our households, our communities, and our state and nation as a whole. And I hope to hear from them about homelessness, a problem on our campus and in our region, affordable health care, student loans, and the creation of well-paying jobs. And I'm sure those are just a few of the issues that they will deal with. So with that, thank you again for being on our campus. Thank you, candidates, for taking time to speak with you. I appreciate you all being here, and go Beach. Go Beach.
And please help me welcome our candidates for tonight. From left to right, we have Democrat Thomas Jefferson Cares, Republican Jack Guerrero, Green Party Cesar Flores, Republican Marta Flores Gibson, Democrat Leticia Vasquez Wilson, Democrat Denise Diaz, Democrat Ali Saleh, Democrat Ana Maria Quintana.
Specifically be for Mr. Jefferson Cares, Mr. Guerrero, Mr. Luis Solache, and Mr. Flores. And it's in regards to housing. So the question is, what is your plan to ensure affordable housing, construction, and to reduce or eliminate homelessness to include military veterans in the district?
Just go ahead. How much time do we have?
1 minute.
So I believe we need to set a goal to start increasing urban housing supply by 2% every year, at least ramp up to start that in the next 3 years and have that probably go on for up to 7 years. To do that, well, So we need to set that goal and make sure that it's met. We should get rid of zoning obstacles that impede that, create incentives, and that should be enough, but if it's not, I believe the state should even then just start building housing itself. Beyond that, for the long-term homeless, I think we can start to try free communities in less populated areas where there isn't a huge real estate market. And we actually spend, state and local government spends over $40,000 a year on homeless services, which is more than enough to house the homeless, except if you do it the wrong way, it just attracts more people to take advantage, attracts people to come from other states. The federal government really does neglect this issue. In fact, it's a protest that I'd even like to set up these free communities in less populated areas and have free round-trip buses to places like Phoenix and maybe Boise, Idaho.
That's time,
but,
sorry. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, with respect to housing, the fundamental problem is on the supply side. I don't believe that government should be tinkering around with rent control. That is a distortion to the market with pernicious consequences across the board. It's the supply side that we need to promote. We need to make it a lot easier with less regulation so that development can occur. I'll point to one example from the Journal of Monetary Economics. Professor Edward Prescott of the Hoover Institution, Nobel laureate, suggested that if we roll back land use regulations to 1980 levels, for example, we can remediate housing immediately, and we can infuse $400 billion in gross domestic product, which is about a 14% increase over what we have today. So the answer is roll back regulation to something reasonable. I would suggest focusing on safety, health, maybe basic nuisance law, and that's it. We should not be presenting onerous regulation, endless permit process that makes construction very difficult and disincents more development. With respect to homeless, I will say that we need to do...
Time. Apologies.
Get to it next.
As a proud Democrat up here on this stage, I'm very happy to know that we as proud Democrats are pushing the idea of more affordable housing in our local communities. As a local mayor, that's a priority for me as a current city elected official. We are currently building, actually not just affordable housing, we have a project that we're working on in Alameda Triangle to potentially bring housing for veterans project. So that's a priority for our Linwood community. We also understand the market value as well, so we have as well a project through Plaza Mexico that we're doing through market value. But more importantly, on Atlantic in our city, we're having a affordable housing. And the concept that we need to make sure we remind ourselves is the concept of not in my backyard. People, that argument is not fair. Because we need more housing in our local communities. And we just have to help educate our local communities the importance of affordable housing and why it makes a difference in our communities. In our city, for example, it's very hard to find a housing where there's a lot of family housing, but there's not individual apartments and places for our families to be able to afford. We have a lot of millennials, younger professionals that need a space to be able to find.
That's time, sir. Thank you.
Can you folks repeat the question, please?
What is your plan to ensure affordable housing, construction, and to reduce or eliminate homelessness to include military veterans in the district?
One of the ways that I would address the housing issue here in California is by repealing the Costa-Hawkins Act that prevents rent control. That's the primary reason to provide affordable health care. And this would be a statewide mandate. I would probably support the rollback of rent prices back to 12 years ago, because people were paying about $800 for rent. And that's about maybe $2,000, maybe about $2,500, a quarter of what they make today. So that's what I would support. I would support repealing, I think it's Prop 13 that allows big businesses to continue paying taxes from 1978 at that rate. So I would support that. I support the veterans, and I would provide more funding for their mental health so that they can get back on their feet and thrive in this society.
Just wanted to say, going forward, I'm going to, at the 10-second mark, raise my hand. So if you guys maybe want to look this way as time goes on, okay? Give you a warning.
Hello again. Next question is directed to our four candidates on the far end. And that question is, despite our best efforts, there's a lot of pollution that comes from our ports and on the 710 freeway. what, if anything, could be done legislatively to address the problem of pollution here locally? And we'll start with Ms. Flores Gibson.
Well, you know, as a counselor in the Long Beach Unified School District, we face that problem with some of our schools, with the children with respiratory diseases or asthma. I would say, you know, starting with, I would say, in truck drivers, for instance, not drive between the hours of 11 and 5. That's a start. However, you can't stop the flow of our goods because that's the common good of California. And we can't stop economy. I would say, though, that we need to get government out of the way and let the goods come in for our welfare.
Ms. Vasquez-Wilson?
I support providing small businesses and also trucking companies with more incentives to provide efficient trucks, you know, so that they can continue the business of transporting goods and services across the region. That plays a huge part in providing jobs and stimulating our local economy. I would also work on legislation that would give local governments authority to provide, to create green zones that would help reduce the negative fumes that are emitted in the air across the region, across the 33rd Senate District. We have a number of environmental concerns across the city. If any of you, I'm sorry, across the 33rd Senate District, if any of you have followed the city of Paramount, the citizens had to organize because unfortunately the local government did not have the authority.
So that's time.
One of the polluters in their community. So I'm interested in creating those green zones to help the local governments be able to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Soleil?
Fortunately, we already have laws that protect us from that, like AB 617 that Assemblywoman Cristina Garcia passed last year, a few years back, that designate some of the pollution problems that we have along the 710 freeway, that also put the area as a red zone. One of the things that I would push is that we are on top of the red zones and make sure that if these laws are implemented in our areas to clean up most of the environmental issues we have up and down the 710 freeway and around the Long Beach area.
Ms. Quintana?
Well, what I would do, the first thing that I would do when I go to Sacramento, quite honestly, is really advocate for the repair of the 710 freeway. As many of you know, the Port of Long Beach is set to increase in the next couple of years. And unfortunately, the repairs that are supposed to be scheduled for the 710 are not taking place. So if we don't address the repair and basically the maintenance, not just the maintenance, but also addressing the needs of the 710, what we're going to end up doing is increasing the amount of pollution that's taking place. So I think that has to be a primary concern. Secondly, in terms of legislation that I would advocate, I think my focus actually would be more in enforcement. Like my colleague just mentioned, we have enough regulations that are protecting our folks, right? The laws are written. The problem has been the lack of enforcement. So we do have a lot of companies that are unnecessarily polluting. Why? Because the enforcement is really just not there. The compliance is lacking. So what I would do is basically study the budget, analyze what it is that we need to do, and make sure that the allocations are given to the appropriate entities.
Moving on to the next question in regards to small businesses. Healthcare is a burden for small business enterprises. Do you believe that Medicare for All would enhance small business operations' ability to hire the best talent? This question would be for Mr. Jefferson Cares, Mr. Guerrero, Mr. Solache, and Mr. Flores.
Well, sure. Yeah, I would support Medicare for All or any system of universal health care. And it is hard for businesses to provide that for its employees. So pretty much, yeah, I would support Medicare for All.
I do support more people having more health care. That's a basic human inclination, but I cannot support the Medicare for all or the single payer model because it's economically inefficient the way it's rolled out. Every single study suggests that if we roll out a program like that in the state of California, it would cost upwards of $400 billion to implement. If we can barely keep up with the current debt, I think it's very irresponsible to lock us into that kind of commitment. In addition, I think that fundamentally the problem for healthcare is that it's just too expensive. What we need to do is make it competitive enough so that the price of producing healthcare comes down. If we can do that, I think we can achieve greater coverage across the board. But I am absolutely against any scheme that requires $400 billion to be spent on single payer with pernicious disincentives to competition.
You know, the conversation of Medicare and healthcare is very important, and I think there's no bigger cost in your life. My mother is a breast cancer survivor, and had she not had the medical services that she received, then I might not have my mother here today. So for me, it's very important that we talk about this issue more. I know that we have differences in regards to single payer and that conversation, but I think it needs to be had in the sense of what happens next. We all like to talk about healthcare is important for everyone, but what are we going to do about it? So I think as a legislator, that would be one of the conversations that we want to make sure we move forward. Do I have an issue with single payer? Absolutely. But do I have an issue that it was shelved and not talked about? Absolutely as well. We need to have a conversation about it. Right or wrong, there's nothing wrong with having a conversation of what happens with our healthcare system. As someone that represents a Chamber of Commerce, our local business community, it will be very impacted as well. So I think it's very important that we keep local business community in fact, keep them in the radar so that their voice is also very important to this conversation. Thank you. Thank you.
So I support single payer Medicare for all. I think that we need to remove the insurance companies that are making millions of dollars out of healthcare as Americans are going bankrupt. We also need to regulate the pharmaceutical industry because they're producing synthetic drugs that are not efficient for the community, and our people are paying and they're using government money to support these businesses. So I support single payer for all. It would actually reduce the amount that we spend on healthcare, and if we get the federal government to print out money for the state of California, just like they do for wars, we can support single Medicare for all for everybody in California and nationwide.
So moving on to the next question, it's also in regards to small businesses. This question will be for Ms. Vasquez-Wilson, Ms. Flores-Gibson, Mr. Soleil, and Ms. Quintana, and we'll go from left to right. The question is, small businesses struggle to compete with large businesses. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, I certainly agree with the fact my husband is a small business owner, and I did mention I was a city council member in the city of Glenwood from 2003 to 2007, and during that time we made helping small businesses a priority. We provided funding to create business improvement districts for the businesses that would in turn provide financial assistance for the businesses to have various programs, including facade improvement programs and assistance for other small programs. I do agree that small businesses tend to be overshadowed by the big businesses, and I would support legislation that would bring more resources to small businesses to ensure that they have access to the capital, the long-term capital that they need to sustain themselves. I know that we have funding available through the business, the California Better Business Bureau, and I would make those loans more easily available for small businesses. I think they're very much available for big corporations, but not small businesses.
Thank you.
I would be an advocate for that. Thank you.
I have to say that our regulations make this far more worse than it is. And, you know, I applaud competition and I applaud also capitalism because that's what makes America work. So with that said, you know, the big businesses, they can afford to hire somebody that's going to look at regulation and compliance. But the small business owner has to do it on their own. And so you have to look and see that government has no business regulating and cutting the profits of either whether you're a big business or a small business. Because if we're constantly doing that, then we're driving the middle class families out of California. And so who's going to be paying the bill of a free state, a poverty state, a welfare state? The middle class has been locked out and they're tired of paying the bill for this state.
Small business can't compete with large businesses, and the only solution is to try to work with some kind of universal health plan to help with this issue, to make sure that businesses are capable to compete with larger business. It's not only, it's a morale issue, and I think that we have to, as society, help out and make sure that we have health care for all. And secondly, like she just said, I mean, when I'm a small business owner myself, when some of us can't hire an HR department, so how do we do it and try to compete with large businesses with all these regulations that are imposed on us? So I think that we have to kind of work with small businesses, probably start with a task force to help out these small businesses to be able to sustain themselves and be able to follow the regulations that are imposed on us.
Whatever goes to do, Jordan? Yes. Great. Definitely, it is difficult for small businesses to compete with large businesses. However, there are ways that we can create mechanisms in which we can support each other. So primarily what I see the role of the state government coming down is basically to become the tool in which we facilitate the local businesses, the local entities, to help out the businesses. So what I would do, quite honestly, is to promote access to capital. I think a lot of businesses find themselves unable to compete because they don't have enough resources to make themselves competitive. Secondly, I would work with the cities so that they can assist the local businesses. One of the things that has been very successful for us small cities is to promote buying within, right? You buy within Bell, you buy within Long Beach, et cetera, and our own economies would be able to sustain itself. And then third, expediting the process in which these small businesses can become operational. One of the biggest expenses for any business to exist really is basically the startup cost. So if the cities facilitate and expedite that process, that in itself would make small businesses much more competitive.
With the subject of business development, California has been criticized by not being business friendly. Many corporations such as Toyota and Jamba Juice and Carl's Jr., they've moved their corporate offices out of California. Is this a problem, and what should we do to address that problem? And the question is directed to, starting with Mr. Kerr.
So, one of the campaign promises I made was to try to have the largest internship program possible, and I'd like to dedicate a team of interns to combing through regulations on businesses that may be outdated, no longer necessary, have unintended consequences, or be too onerous, and to try to encourage the legislature every year to even if they're small things, maybe there are thousands of small things, maybe some big things, every year try to update that to get rid of things that aren't necessary. But even something bigger, I think we could add a lot to our whole economy by taking advantage of and I know I'm not going to have enough time, so I'd encourage you with my website, tomcares.com, but to take advantage of the cryptocurrency revolution, to give people the power to leverage their potential the way startups and companies do, which I think could really add a lot to our economy. If we're the first place in the world to do that in a serious way, it could really be game-changing. But I think that could change the whole environment for businesses and economic development in the state.
And that's time. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the problem is actually very, very simple to understand. We are the most overtaxed and overregulated state in the entire country. In my opening comments, I mentioned a number of large national surveys that consistently rank California dead last in terms of business climate. Whether it's Wall Street Journal, National Review, Kiplinger's, Forbes, all of these publications rank California at the very bottom. We have the highest marginal tax rate in the entire United States and a litany of regressive taxes on working people. It is no wonder that we've lost 16,000 businesses in the last 10 years. Are you understanding a pattern with the problem in California? We need to lower our taxes as much as we can to infuse greater economic development and greater economic activity. There's an economist, Arthur Laffer, that you should look up. What he has promulgated is that when you actually lower the tax rate, the state can actually recover more tax increment or more tax revenue because a lower tax rate incents greater economic activity.
I spent almost 13 years of my life working for a nonprofit world, and even though it's a nonprofit, it still has to run as a business. I currently represent a group that advocates for business community, and I can tell you firsthand that our small business community is bleeding because they're not getting the resources that they should get. You know, California prides itself on being the 5th largest economy. That's good. That's a fact. But what are we doing to help more small business community? And SC33 from Huntington Park to Long Beach, even though we have a lot of business community, there's a lot of small businesses. These are family-owned businesses. These are businesses that we all go shop to, boutique businesses. So we need to do more to help them out because they are hurting and they're bleeding. And this is what helps us be that 5th largest economy to help succeed. So we need to make sure that we as legislators, wherever any of us that make it to the state senate, we need to be a voice for these small businesses because ST33 is full of small businesses that need our attention and need our help. Thank you.
So I would propose, as an education administrator, there's 3 types of taxes. There's taxes for big corporations, taxes for franchises, and taxes for mom and pop shops. So I would support that we tax big corporations and franchises at a different rate, and mom and pop shops would be taxed at a lower rate. There's a lot of talk about rent control for residents. We need rent control for businesses because landlords are hiking up the rents and small businesses cannot compete. This is why their prices are so high. So I think that, you know, as we develop our society, we need to start bringing out the issues that are hurting our communities, that are hurting people that want to start up like a juice place or like a spa, a nail shop. We need to address rent control for businesses also.
Okay, the next question goes to Ms. Flores-Gibson, Ms. Vasquez-Wilson, Mr. Saleh, and Ms. Quintana. California is driving policy on housing, energy, and health coverage. With these ambitious goals, how will you address paying for these benefits when taxes are already much higher than other states?
I'm sorry, am I first? Who's first?
Ms. Vasquez-Wilson.
Would you repeat the question?
California is driving policy on housing, energy, and health coverage. With these ambitious goals, how will you address paying for these benefits when taxes are already much higher than other states?
Housing, energy, and healthcare. Okay. Well, I think Proposition 13 needs to be looked at. I think that we need to revisit how we can reformulate that proposition to make it so that the funds that are paid into that specific fund are equitable for all of the folks that are contributing to that.
Thank you.
I just want to say that I will not add one more dime to the cost of living of the people in California and the 33rd District. And I have to say this, is that, you know, California has a surplus. And instead of finding ways to put the money wherever they want to put it, Sacramento wants to put it, why not give everyone a credit of $300? Why not? So I just think that, you know, instead of looking to tax and tax and tax the people, we need to really look at solutions to keep the businesses here and to stop taxing the middle class, because we're losing the businesses and we're losing the middle class. Sacramento is failing the middle class.
Doing government with best practices is the way to do it without raising taxes. I mean, look at City of Bell. We were on the brink of bankruptcy. We were able to revive it by looking at every single contract and looking at every city contract, as I said, and making sure that we were not going to raise taxes on our residents. The middle class and working class community has suffered enough. We should be looking at the budget and making sure that we fund those through the budget, and if we have to raise taxes, that we look at billionaires and big corporations and not the middle class and the working class community, because we've been taxed enough.
I think one of the problems with the state of California is not so much our taxation system, but really the inequities that exist in our state. Like someone mentioned, California is the 5th largest economy in the world. There is some transition of businesses coming in, but we also have transitions of businesses leaving and coming in. It's the normal surplus of just the economies as a whole. I think the problem is that we do have to look at the budget and analyze what it is that we're spending. Like our colleague just mentioned, California has a surplus. That money can be used. Right now, the current governor is spending that surplus in certain projects, for example, investing in child care, pre-K programs and whatnot. That money, I think, can be used to address certain needs that the state has. So, for example, I mean, he did this already with health coverage, right, and education, and housing too. So if we use those resources and really analyze what it is that the state of California should prioritize, then I think we can be able to cover all those 3 things: housing, energy, and health coverage. And actually, one more thing that hasn't been addressed is healthcare access.
And that's time. Thank you.
I'll address it later.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, thank you once again, candidates, for being here. Thank you, everyone, for being here as well. On behalf of the Regional Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, again, just want to remind everyone that, we are a nonpartisan organization, but good luck to all of you on the March 26th election.